I felt sick and fell asleep at my neighbor's. After seeing this, my girlfriend broke up with me. Am I terrible? My girlfriend Celine, 20F, and I, 21M, have been dating for about 7 months now, although I had feelings for her for approximately 3 years before we started our relationship. I share a flat with 2 other girls and 1 guy. One of the girls is Kaya, who is a good friend of mine. Coincidentally, Celine's ex-boyfriend cheated on her with Kaya, although Kaya was unaware that he was in a relationship at the time. When I first brought Celine over to my place earlier in our relationship, she confided in me about the situation. Realizing the potential for complications, I asked Celine if this was a deal-breaker for her. She said she wasn't sure, acknowledging that Kaya hadn't known she was facilitating cheating. The next day, Celine told me she had thought it over and held no resentment towards Kaya, but felt insecure and uneasy about us living in the same house. We decided to continue our relationship and established some boundaries. One of these boundaries was that Kaya and I would no longer sleep over in each other's rooms. We used to have movie nights on Fridays in Kaya's room, as it was the only room with a TV, and sometimes I would fall asleep there. Everything was purely platonic, and I made sure to inform Celine about this. Fast forward to the present, our relationship feels like a fairy tale. Being with Celine is amazing. However, my exams are approaching, and because I am terribly underprepared, I needed to focus intensely on my studies. I told Celine that I would need to be somewhat selfish and wouldn't be able to spend much time with her or communicate frequently until my exams were over. For the past 3 weeks, my routine has been grueling. Waking up, spending the entire day and night at the library, coming home to sleep for about 5 to 6 hours, and then heading back to study again. This routine is exhausting, making me feel like a zombie, but I have a lot of material to catch up on and very little time. I must admit that I haven't been in frequent contact with Celine during this period. We only talked twice on FaceTime and texted very little. She tried initiating conversations, but I had my phone shut off while studying and only replied when I left the library. During our second call, she expressed that she felt neglected, and it was really starting to affect her. She mentioned that she wanted to spend some time together. I apologized, told her that I missed her too, and invited her to come over and spend the night. However, she arrived about an hour later than expected, and by that time, I had already fallen asleep. She still stayed the night, but the next morning it was evident that she was upset that I had fallen asleep. 3 days ago, I got really sick. I threw up at the library and asked Kaya to come pick me up because my other roommates were out of town, and Celine would have taken too long to get there. When I got into bed, I threw up all over my sheets. At this point, my memory becomes foggy. I was very drowsy and not thinking clearly. Instead of cleaning up and setting new sheets, I texted Celine, telling her that I was very sick, had vomited all over my bed, and asked if I could sleep over at her place. I received no reply, so I went downstairs and slept on the couch. When I woke up the next morning, I found myself asleep on Kaya's bed, shirtless. I had no recollection of how I got there. Celine came to check up on me and walked in on me in this state. This was when I woke up, and Celine was very upset. She yelled, "How could you?" and left before I had a chance to explain anything. Kaya later told me that she had seen me asleep on the couch and offered to let me sleep on her bed instead. I have no memory of this. She also mentioned that I probably took my shirt off because I felt hot at some point during the night. Kaya assured me that she slept on the couch and we did not share the bed. I've been trying to reach out to Celine, but she has blocked my number, WhatsApp, and Instagram. We have 2 mutual friends, but neither of them has replied to any of my texts. My fever subsided last night, so I went to Celine's place to clarify the situation, but her roommate said she wasn't going to talk and made me leave. This whole situation feels horrible. I love the relationship that I have, or had, with Celine, and the thought that it might be over makes me feel extremely distraught. Reflecting on how I've been recently, I realize that much of the blame falls on me. My exams aren't an excuse to completely shut myself out of my relationship. I need to work on balancing life and studies simultaneously. Besides her finding me asleep on Kaya's bed, Celine probably had a lot of pent-up animosity and frustration from the past 3 weeks of minimal contact. It's painful knowing that my unnecessary decisions have likely cost me a great person in my life. Had I put in more effort, things might have been different. Update. The reason I'm posting this is because I saw Celine for the final time a couple of days ago, and I also want to clear the air on some matters. To keep track of time, let's call day 1 the day Celine broke up with me. Day 4 was when my initial post was published. I sat for my final exam on day 7 and didn't actually check up on the post until day 8. I was very, very shocked reading the comments. To be blatantly honest, I wasn't expecting like 1,000 people calling me a huge bellend. I knew I made a mistake, but in my head, I thought I was a good person. You know how you just kind of perceive yourself to always try and do things with good intentions, so you think you can't ever be a bad person? I don't know if that makes sense. But reading the post opened up my perspective and made me realize that the relationship was not salvageable. And it also gave me depth on the hurt I caused Celine. I shattered her trust completely, and was just not a good boyfriend for an entire month leading up to the breakup. So, I just didn't contact her. As I'll mention later on, I was not in a good headspace and distanced myself because I was an even bigger ass than I let on previously. On day 12, she messaged me to ask for her iPad back. She'd let me borrow it for my notes. We last met on day 15 when she came to collect it, among other things. We were both silent the whole time she was there, which must have only been like 5 minutes or so. She returned some of my stuff I'd left in her apartment, and when she was about to leave, I told her I was sorry. She said okay. I said I never meant to hurt her. She, again, just said okay. I figured nothing I could say was the right thing at this point, and we said goodbye. So like I said, the very expected outcome occurred. I can't lie and say that I'm instantaneously a better person now. I'm not. I want to be better, but I can't become a better person in a couple of weeks and will need to really work on my character in general. As for Celine, I can only just pray and wish for the best for her. I'm going to answer some of the main questions that people had. I never went into the full depth of the story because there is a lot of context behind it all, and I just never expected the post to reach so many people. Was Kaya aware of Celine's boundaries? Yes, she was. I informed her on the same day that Celine and I discussed our boundaries. Kaya appeared to be very understanding, and we both maintained our distance from each other since then. How did you pass out from vomiting? It was due to dehydration. On the first day, I went to the hospital at noon because my condition wasn't improving. I had a temperature of 104 degrees, and a blood test revealed severe dehydration, so they put me on an IV drip. I didn't mention any of this earlier because I never anticipated it would be criticized and thought that describing myself as very ill would be sufficient in my previous post. Why do I need to study so hard? This question requires a lot of context, which I'll provide now. I'm Indian, and my father is very much like the strict Indian dads often portrayed in movies. Imagine every Indian dad stereotype, and you'll get my dad. He's in the military and is as strict as you can imagine. He tried to force me to join the army, but I wanted to pursue a career in computer science. This caused a significant rift between us. I moved from India to the UK for my studies, and one of the only reasons he agreed to pay for my tuition was because A, the university I got into is prestigious, which pleased him, and B, he could monitor my grades and use this as leverage to make me study harder. In my first year, I didn't do very well. I finished with an average grade of 63%, which, although around the median score, upset my dad a lot. He got extremely physical, hitting me in the face a few times, and I ended up with some bruises. He also threatened to stop paying for my final year if I didn't achieve an average of 70% this year, which would mean that the 2 years I've spent here would go to waste. As an international student, I can't get a loan either. Additionally, I performed poorly on my summatives earlier this year. I scored 41 on an exam worth 13% of my entire grade, and 52 and 59 on 2 others worth 6% each. Celine knows everything about my dad. We had a long conversation before I went absent in our relationship, where I explained that I was far behind on my studies and feared the consequences. We agreed that I should focus on studying as much as possible until my exams were over, and she said she'd be fine with less frequent contact during this period. Why did you barely stay in contact with Celine? To put it simply, I was a bad boyfriend. This is going to sound awful, but part of me just didn't want to deal with the responsibilities of being in a relationship. I was overwhelmed and felt like talking to someone was an added burden. I completely acknowledge how terrible that is of me to even think. When I had those thoughts, I downplayed them and convinced myself it was just me being cranky. Regardless, there's no excuse for going weeks without talking to your girlfriend. And I was an asshole for doing that. However, I never had any intentions of cheating on her under any circumstances. I didn't want to deal with anyone at all, so I didn't want to be around Kaya either. I mention this because a lot of people speculated that Kaya and I had something going on, which isn't true. I just wanted to be alone until my exams were over. "Why did Kaya invite you to her bed?" I asked her, and she explained, "I was heading out for an overnight study session, which meant no one would be home, so I thought you might as well sleep in my bed. Given the condition you were in, I didn't think it would be a big deal. I assumed Celine would understand. When I got back, I didn't sleep in the bed, I took the couch. I couldn't sleep in my roommates' beds because they were out of town and had locked their rooms. Kaya occasionally hosts parties, so they lock their rooms just in case. That's about all I can say on this matter. I apologize if this explanation still leaves some people unsatisfied. As for what's next, I won't be rushing into a new relationship anytime soon. I'm overdue for some self-reflection. Along with trying to enjoy my summer holidays, I hope to figure myself out and do better moving forward. Okay, friends, let's move on to another interesting story. By the way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I really want 1,000 subscribers. Would I be the asshole if I broke up with my boyfriend this year, which marks the 10th anniversary of his wife's death? My uncle became friends with Leon when they started working together, and soon Leon began attending our family gatherings and birthdays. Leon is a great guy, and we hit it off immediately. My family always spoke highly of him, saying what a wonderful person he is. One day, Leon asked me out on a date, and I agreed. We began dating, and I learned that Leon has 2 children, aged 14 and 12. His wife tragically passed away in an accident 9 years ago. Here's where the issue arises. Leon frequently talks about his late wife. While it might sound harsh to complain about this, it's not out of jealousy, but rather discomfort. He brings her up during our intimate moments, like after we've been intimate or while we're on a date. Sometimes he'll randomly share anecdotes about her, leaving me feeling like I'm with a married man and I'm just the other woman. I don't ask for much, just a date where it's just the 2 of us, without feeling like I'm competing with his past. Leon sees a psychologist and claims he's working through his grief, but I have my doubts. I'm not his first girlfriend since his wife's passing. He maintains contact with his wife's family, which is understandable since they're his children's grandparents. However, I met them once, and it was an uncomfortable experience. They treated me poorly and continuously talked about how much Leon and his wife loved each other. They even played a wedding video of them while I stood awkwardly because they didn't offer me a seat. It felt like they thought it was cute for me to see my boyfriend with his late wife, but it was just weird. Leon often says that his late wife was the love of his life. While I find that sweet, it makes me question our future together. Do I really want to grow old with someone who makes it clear that he'll never love me as much as he loved her? Is that the kind of love I want? I want to be the only one for my future husband. Once I took him to my favorite place and he said, "It's beautiful. I wish wife's name were here to see this. You 2 would have been good friends." It's like being a third wheel in my own relationship. We've talked about this several times, but he usually says he does it without thinking and then falls back into the same pattern. I'm exhausted. When I discussed this with my family, they told me that a real woman wouldn't be jealous of a deceased woman, which I'm not. I'm just uncomfortable, and should be happy to be with a man capable of such deep love. They said I shouldn't expect him to love me the same way since all love is different, and that I should be empathetic and supportive. I listened to them, but nothing improved. The pressure to go through with this has become unbearable. So I stopped listening to my family and finally spoke with a friend who's a psychologist. She told me that his behavior is unhealthy and advised me to think for myself. She texted, "Good for him for loving his wife so much, but you don't deserve to be used as an emotional support doll." And she's right. I've decided to end the relationship, but this year marks the 10th anniversary of his wife's death. Both his family and even my family are helping to organize a family reunion in her honor, celebrating the things she loved. While I think it's a nice gesture, I'm fully ready to end the relationship now. However, I'm afraid I'll be seen as the bad guy for doing it this year when he's so vulnerable. The 10th anniversary is in July, and I want to end things now, but I fear that I'll come off as heartless, especially since even my family is pushing me to act like I was his wife's best friend. He even says that his wife and I would have been good friends if we had met. Why would he want his late wife to be best friends with the woman he's currently with? It's too weird, and I feel like I'm going insane because everyone around me sees it as something cute. Update. Several people who had experienced similar situations reached out to me, which made me feel understood. I finally opened up to all my friends about everything he had done. I had always avoided doing this because I knew they would tell me to leave him, and I felt trapped by everyone else's opinions. It was clear that we didn't love each other, even if he claimed otherwise. Yes, I did seek approval through my post. I needed reassurance that I wasn't crazy, and that I was doing the right thing before I could be honest with my friends. The next day, I finally talked to Leon. I desperately needed to break up at that point. He came over to my house, and I told him we needed to talk. I got straight to the point and said I wanted to end the relationship. He immediately asked what he had done wrong. We had already had this conversation before, and he knew what made me uncomfortable. I was exhausted, so I listed everything. How he never defended me from his ex-in-laws, how he constantly mentioned his late wife despite me telling him multiple times that it made me uncomfortable, and how he made me feel like a third wheel in my own relationship. He apologized, saying the same thing he always did, that he didn't realize when he was doing those things. We had this discussion many times before, but this time I told him I wanted to break up. I also mentioned that I didn't think his therapist was helping, but Leon insisted that the therapist was helping him and that he felt mentally well. Leon then suggested that we could start going to his therapist together because he believed it can be hard for a woman to be with a widower, and jealousy is a normal thing in these cases. That comment really triggered me. I've allowed both his family and mine to make me believe that I'm irrationally jealous. I've let blogs about relationships with widowers fill my head with ideas like, you just have to be empathetic. Don't expect him to love you. He'll always love his first wife more, so get used to it and be a good woman. I've let myself be walked over just because everyone told me that getting over a loss is difficult and that I needed to be understanding and considerate of his feelings. I'm so exhausted from all of it. I'm tired of being empathetic. I've been carrying this frustration for months, and in that moment, I just exploded. We yelled at each other and said a lot of things, but in the end, he still believed that I was wrong and just jealous. He said I clearly wasn't ready to date a widower and compared me to his ex. I called him a hypocrite, pointing out that while he badmouthed his ex-girlfriend, he probably treated her the same way he treated me, using us to fill a void and treating us like sex dolls. None of what I said seemed to register with him because he left my house saying I was just jealous of a ghost and had disappointed him. I'm fed up and furious as I write this. As soon as he left, I messaged my mother, telling her that I refused to live the same life as my sister-in-law, always in the shadow of a woman who's no longer here. I told her they should have empathy for me, not for a man who isn't even part of our family. I made it clear that I'm tired of being pressured and that I don't care if I remain single forever. They might say I have a cold heart, as they always do, but I want to stop caring about that. My friends are staying with me to keep me company, and I can finally vent all the built-up frustrations to them. I don't feel good being second, and I know I'll always be second in this relationship. I don't want to replace his first wife, and even if I did, I know I never could. While some people might be okay with this kind of relationship, I'm not. Maybe I'm not as empathetic as others, but I'm certainly not cold-hearted. If his wife were alive, he would never have chosen me. He wouldn't even have looked at me. I don't want that kind of love, and it took me a long time to accept that. I feel that I'm still young and can wait for someone who will make me their first choice. I hope Leon can overcome his traumas and find happiness, but not with me. Someone messaged me saying I don't deserve his love, but what love are we talking about? At this point, I'm just a sex doll to him. For now, he's not going to change and doesn't want to change, but that's no longer my concern. I'm not his bedroom therapist anymore. I'd rather be single forever than fall into that trap again. I plan to start more therapy and take up Pilates. I'm still affected by all of this, and nothing has really changed overnight, but I'm just happy to be free now. For now, I just needed to vent, so sorry if this sounds too aggressive. How do you like these stories? Write your opinion in the comments. Let's get 1,000 subscribers on this channel. Love you.